السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول حي على الصلاة. حي على حي على الفلاح. حي على الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters, before getting into the theme of Khutbah ask that we remember our brothers and sisters throughout this Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may be suffering, whether we know the cause of suffering or not. It may be something that we're watching every day on television, we're watching it on social media, on our phones. It may be that it's someone within our house. It may be someone or some people in our neighborhood. It may be on a state, a local, or county level. It may be on a global level. But remember to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy, to relieve the suffering of those who are suffering throughout this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I want to just mention just a few very quick places that we would ask Allah to relieve the suffering of these believers. One of them is the 13-month, close the door, please. If you got the 13-month civil war that has been going on in Sudan. And this has caused millions of individuals to have to flee the country. 3 million are estimated to have left the country of Sudan because of the civil war, this fight over the leadership. And it's believed that another 11 million Sudanese are internally displaced, that they've had to leave their city, their village, and go to a very different part of the country that they have no connection to whatsoever. This is something that we're not seeing on our nightly news. It's something that we're not hearing almost anything about. But let us remember our brothers and sisters and this horrible conflict that's going on in Sudan. It's been going on for 13 months. And you can rarely see or hear or read anything about what's going on. But if we didn't know about anything about what's happening in Sudan before, we know now. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve the suffering. Rape is being used as a weapon of war in the Sudanese context. A number of years ago, I was in Sudan, and it was during a time when the South was trying to break away from the northern Muslim government in Khartoum. They eventually formed their own state of South Sudan. And one of the reasons I was there as a journalist was to try to investigate, to see whether or not rape was actually being used as a weapon of war and other things like that. It is a horrible situation that you and I, let us pray that if we've never been in an environment where women and girls are being violated, doing nothing in the field of combat, but being violated in the way that they are to try to demoralize those who they are opposing. So this is a horrible crime for any place, anywhere, for this to be used as a weapon of war. But the reports are that this is what's going on in that civil war conflict. We're not talking about people from one country and another country within the same country. This is what some of the horrible things that are going on. Let us remember our brothers and sisters. And finally, let us continue to make dua for our brothers and sisters in occupied Palestine and Gaza, as well as in Lebanon. As was mentioned last week, the kind of death and destruction that has been raining down on the citizens, the residents of Gaza. Now, similar kinds of destruction, the bombing of schools, the bombing of hospitals, the bombing of clearly residential apartment buildings are being targeted as what? As a retaliation for a missile or two that was fired that did not kill maybe one person, if that. Brothers and sisters, these are, by any people's imagination, these are war crimes. And the country that's fueling the Zionist state of Israel with these weapons primarily are coming from right here in the United States. So let us remember our brothers and sisters, whether we know the specifics of their pain and suffering or not. Brothers and sisters, I have a short message for you all and a reminder to myself. And this short reminder is something that the essence of it was exemplified by the best human beings that walked the face of the earth up until the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm talking about those Nabi, those prophets. I'm referencing those Rasulullah, those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for the guidance of mankind at that particular time for a particular people. The Prophet Muhammad said over 124,000 prophets were raised for this guidance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the best from every society. It wasn't somebody who was shaky, someone who had a bad character, someone who was unreliable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the best from these societies up until the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and elevated their status, had direct communication with them through revelation. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would hold and held accountable what the people did based on what his chosen was, the message that they had brought to them, to these people. So when we look and see what's the best way, how is it? In any time, in any struggle, of course, we look to the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But I'm trying to make the point that it wasn't just the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave a kind of exemplary conduct to, and then would hold the people responsible for how they dealt with, whether they submitted to the message or whether they did not. And so I just want to remind myself and remind you that with all of these messages that have come to mankind, there was a common theme oftentimes with those prophets whose circumstances became very difficult. Maybe the people wanted to stone them. The people actually killed prophets that were raised for their guidance. That it was not an easy task coming to a disbelieving people and then calling them and saying that I don't care what your status is in this society. I don't care how much money you may have. I don't care how many wives you may have. I don't care how big your house is. This is the message of La ilaha illallah. This is the message that you are going to be judged by on Qiyamah. And so in difficult times, we read the Quran and we read the prophetic literature from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. And what we find is that in so many instances, regardless of how excruciating the pain may have been from what they were suffering from, the disappointment that they felt, even the breakup of their homes, no matter how they were affected as a result of carrying the message of submission, the prophets had a common thread that came with all of them. And I want to just talk for a minute about this common thread because it's so much of a reminder for us here today. It's a reminder in a world where we never know from one minute to the next when this society or that society or our society right here will be victimized by some kind of death, mass death and destruction. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam made it clear that to walk Allah, that total reliance should be on Him. No matter what the circumstances may be, and we have confidence that the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is superior to any plan that we could have drawn up. That no matter how painful a circumstance may be, no matter how life-threatening a circumstance may be, we should have confidence that in Allah, that His plan is the best plan. That there's no doubt that no matter how difficult it could be, His plan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan, is the best plan. And so when we turn in Quran and prophetic literature, we see this common expression that was uttered by so many of the prophets of Allah, that their narratives and part of their narratives contained in the Quran, where they uttered, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. That Allah is sufficient for us. And I don't need anything else. If Allah is pleased with what we are doing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient. I'm not calling on anyone else to help. I'm calling only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah is sufficient and He is the best disposer of our affairs. That there's no one, no thing, there's no need running to someone. Help me, help me. It's not to say in our day-to-day lives that all of us at some point we need assistance and help. But when we turn and look the context of these various prophets in the Quran calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and exclaiming out of their mouths that Allah is sufficient for me and He's the best disposer of affairs. Brothers and sisters, in hadith contained, I think it's in Tirmidhi. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that if you were to rely upon Allah with the reliance due to Him, He would provide for us as He provides for the bird. That it goes out in the morning with an empty stomach and He returns full in the evening with a full stomach. That the Prophet Muhammad was instructing us that if we had the kind of reliance that we should have in Allah as a disposer of our affairs, that every day we would go out and seeking the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whether it's at the amount of the sum that we want, Allah will sustain us. So there's no need in bowing down. There's no need in our acting as if someone else is the controller over our affairs. Brothers and sisters, the Prophet Ibrahim, when he was thrown into the fire, and as you know, when you read the Quran, and you read the Surah literature, this was not an ordinary fire. This was something that in some tafsir you see that it may have taken weeks in order to build a big enough pit and put enough fuel in that fire. It was like a blast furnace. It was so hot that they had to propel Ibrahim via some kind of catapult kind of operation to throw him into the fire because the heat coming from the flame was so hot it couldn't just get up on the pit and throw him into the fire. And the Prophet Ibrahim, alayhi salam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, very simple dua. Not crying.
Can you dip?
Get me out of here.
Keep walking past this. Can you duck it?
That is dua.
I just want you to duck the camera, brother. That's it. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
This dua was simply Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. that Allah is sufficient for me, and He is the best disposer of affairs. When the Prophet Musa was leading the Bani Israel from under the tyranny of this particular Pharaoh, and they got to a point where there was nothing in front of them but the sea. And many say that it was the Red Sea. Allah knows best what sea it was. But when they got to the point where there was nowhere for them to go, and Pharaoh and his men were closing in on them to either kill them or take them back in captivity in Egypt. When the Prophet Musa got to this point before Allah had him touch the sea with his staff and the waves parted, before this happened, Allah tells us in the Quran, the Prophet Musa also made this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for us, and that He is the best disposer of affairs. Let me give just maybe a couple of other quick examples of prophets actually calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most difficult of circumstances, calling upon Allah using the same dua or a similar dua. Another one is, we know the story of Prophet Yaqub. We know how much he loved his son Yusuf. We know that the brothers who were so jealous of Yusuf that they would concoct a plan that we will tell our father that when this young Yusuf was out with us, that what actually happened was that he was eaten by a wolf. And then they smeared blood on Yusuf's shirt. And the response, the love that Prophet Yaqub had for his son Yusuf was just a tremendous kind of attachment and love. And the Prophet Yaqub responded in a very similar fashion. It captured the essence of this dua, and that was that I only complain of my suffering and my grief to Allah, and I know from Allah that which you do not know. Brothers and sisters, just one other example, and this is from the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there were a number of different instances throughout the Quran and the Sirah. You'll see where the Prophet sallallahu made the same dua. But I'll just use just give one as an example. And this is at the time of the second battle that the Muslims fought under the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu after the Islamic State had been established in Medina. This is, of course, the Battle of Uhud. And prior to the start of the battle, the Munafiqun, the hypocrites, who were in the ranks of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and in the ranks of the believers, they had gone with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. This was not just right outside of Medina. They had gone and marched with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and the believers to this mountain, this mount of Uhud. And before there was any battle or encounter, those who had this hypocrisy in their hearts began to try to have the Muslims doubt whether or not they could be successful on this particular day. They were very, very busy in going and pushing up on one brother after the other to try to convince them that there's no win for us on this day. Do you know who's on the other side? Khalid ibn Walid. This man never lost a battle. He's legendary. This is who we're going up against. He's in the ranks. All of these warriors are in the ranks. We don't have a chance. And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu realized that this large gathering that they were about to encounter this large number of disbelievers was enough to give pause to anybody. But now you have people in your ranks who you thought were with you. They are marching right with you. They may have been chanting the same kinds of songs that were common at that time, the same chants to inspire bravery in the hearts of these mujahideen. But there were hypocrites in the ranks, and they began to spread discord and to tell the believers there's no way that we can win on this day. Look at the people we are opposing. And the Prophet Muhammad, this was very difficult times to find in the Syrian literature. That when all of the reports were coming back to me about what was going on in the ranks, the Prophet Muhammad uttered the same Jumah. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Our praises be to Allah, and praise Him for His assistance against the evils that we do and the unsuccessfulness of our actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, no one can lead astray, and whomsoever Allah calls us to action, to account. And for the wrongness of the deeds, we don't have to lead the right. For Allah help those who help the religion of Muhammad. So long we saw them, countless amongst them. For Allah disappoint those who try to disgrace the religion of Muhammad. So long we saw them, and do not make us those. Brothers and sisters, we've mentioned it a number of times. And in the little travel that I've done across different places here in the United States, it's very obvious that there are certain themes that are coming from the memoirs all across the country. And one of them is that this 13-month genocide that we have been witnessing against the Palestinian people. And now we're witnessing similar acts in Lebanon. That for these past 13 months, that the way that the Palestinian people are dealing with this kind of genocide, how they are displaying in those little short clips that we see, that people capture and put on TikTok and put on Facebook, and these interviews and these translations oftentimes of what even the children are saying, that they are exemplifying for the most part, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, that these believing Palestinians are exemplifying through their behavior that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for them, and that He is the best disposer of their affairs. You know, the Prophet Muhammad it said that he was making reference to the shuhada, those martyrs who were killed during this time on the battlefield, and he's on the battlefield with them fighting. And the Prophet Muhammad described how there is an opening, a portal that's coming right from the earth, and he could see those who were being martyred. He could see their souls going up as they were being martyred. So there can't be another place on earth at this particular point in time where the portal could be as large as it must be for our brothers and sisters, our babies and our children, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken their souls from unjust actions on the part of people who are not trying to just win a war. It's not a war. It's a genocide. It's an attempt to send a message. Don't mess with us in any kind of way, or the same thing will happen to you. But while all of this is going on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's Lebanon or whether it's in North Gaza, Allah, according to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu has this giant portal, this giant like window, like a funnel, where he can see the souls of the martyrs rising and going up. And so we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not subject us to similar circumstances and conditions, where every single day there's a story that I heard and watched recently. And there was a Palestinian brother in North Gaza. Now, I'm sure that those who are living in northern Gaza don't know what to do at this particular point. They're told to evacuate. Go to the south, you'll be safe. It's bombed there. And go back to the north. Stay here, you'll be all right. It's getting bombed again. And there's a brother in North Gaza. And he said that he buried 117 members of his family. Not like he had 116 children, but his aunts and uncles and grandchildren and daughters and sons, 117 of his biological children. And he said why he had to do it was because the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, would not allow those others to come in and to retrieve the bodies of relatives. So they said, well, that's all the people over there in this area, that's your family. Okay, well, if you want them out, you got to go get them. And this is what this brother did. Just imagine for a moment the kind of iman that this brother must have had that was sharpened because of an experience like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best disposer of our affairs. What may look on first sight is something that's very horrible. And you can't take away from the horror of children being targeted, shot in the head. You can't minimize that. There's no way that you can minimize that. But no matter what goes on in our individual or collective lives, both here in Winston-Salem, both here in this country, both for the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, we have to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the disposer of all our affairs. I just want to share one other thing and I'll be done. In the 1990s, in the early 1990s, when the Serbs were just going crazy on Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina and surrounding areas, I happened to be going to a conference that was actually in Iran. And I sat beside for hours and hours and hours after we stopped in Europe, a Bosnian Hafiz of Quran, a young Bosnian brother. And we sat, we had good English, and we sat and we talked for maybe 2 hours before I couldn't hold it any longer. I had to ask him about this Holocaust that was the Serbs were putting on the Bosnian Muslims. And he said, you know, so many of our beautiful masjids, historically beautiful in age and appearance, were just devastated. The Serbs were targeting our masjids. He said, but you know, it was the best thing that could have happened to us. Because our masjids, for the most part, were empty. We weren't going to pray. I'm a Hafiz of Quran. I met every salah. And I looked behind me every salah, and there was just a handful of brothers coming to the masjid. But when that genocide started with the Serbs, the masjids were full. And he said, now, after these years, after this war has stopped, our masjids are full. Our students, our young people are learning the Quran again. The attachment to this deen is something that in my lifetime I haven't seen anything like it. So, you know, Allah is the best disposal of our affairs and what may appear and is at the moment very tragic and unfortunate events. Oh Lord, they have another plan to bring the demand of the people to another level and to show that the power is truly with Allah. Oh Allah, give us an understanding of this name that is beneficial for us in this world and in the next.
Amen.
Allah, allow us the honor of being grateful to you when times are good or when times are difficult. And oh Allah, maybe not this Ummah, but the Prophet Muhammad himself was an object of test for the disbelieving people. Let me have just a few very quick announcements. First announcement, of course, is that we have the car wash that's going on tomorrow starting at 10 o'clock. We have this big soccer box in the back and downstairs we have a square. The device that we had on the wall up there fell off the wall. It was strong enough, sticky stuff, I guess. And we have to get another. So right now we're using the square again if you want to make donations. But it's very, very important that we not pass by, that we don't make donations. The only way that we're going to move forward is that we give feasibility. And we are going to, we've done it before, we get ready to start back again, start posting what is coming in so that you will know what is coming in, you know what is going out. If there's any question or doubt about how much is being raised and what it's being used for, this coming Sunday, and I guess it comes in 2 a.m. or something like that, on Sunday morning, daylight savings time. I don't know if it's going on or coming off, I guess it's coming off. So that means that next Friday, the Adhan for Jumah is at 1 o'clock, and the Khutbah will start at 1:15. I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, the Community Mosque Academy is supposed to start on Sunday, I think it's at 10:45 to 2 o'clock. And the Engaging the Quran class is at 2 p.m. And also there will be a couple of three brothers outside under the shelter who will be passing out voter information. And I want to say that this is not coming directly from the community mosque. These individuals that we are Muslim brothers who are passing out their recommendations about who to vote for. As an entity like the mosque, we can openly endorse, openly endorse anybody. And if we were to do it in this mosque, as different opinions that we have as to who to vote for on all different kinds of levels, we'd be in here fighting each other or something. We did that. But this information will be passed around. Take it particularly if you haven't voted yet. Yes.
Yeah, the Community Mosque Academy starts at 10 o'clock, not 10:45.
Okay.
10 o'clock.
Okay. It's going to be something. It comes to Simone.